Today we're here to show you the right way to get a scope mounted onto your firearm. A good scope mounting job begins with using the appropriate bases and rings. Today I'm using this Weaver one-piece base to install in the Savage 110 action. To get started, we just want to make sure the surface of all the things that we're working on is nice and clean. I like to use isopropyl alcohol and a cotton swab, and we'll just go ahead and want to clean the mounting surface here on the receiver and here on the base itself. And we just want to do this to make sure that there's no excess oil, grease, dirt, anything else that might make your base sit awkwardly or not adhere with the thread locking compound that we'll be using later. For this one-piece base, we'll just use the slot on the right-hand side. Should go over the receiver port. And we just want to check first to make sure that all the holes align properly and that we're using the correct base. And then we do want to note on this one that we do have two different lengths of screws, which is not uncommon to accommodate the different thicknesses of receivers and base combos. So take your time when you're installing your screws to verify that you're putting the screws in the right location. The longer screws should go in the rear, with the shorter screws going up front. So we're going to want to exercise caution here and not booger these screws up. It's very easy to do, so we want to make sure that we're using the correct fitting screwdriver tip. And I'm using a Weaver torque wrench here. We want to get these torqued down to about 15 to 20 inch-pounds. And let's just go ahead and just get these started. We don't have to final tighten them as of yet. This time we'll just go ahead and snug these screws down. As we tighten the screws down, we just want to verify that they're not extending too far into the receiver and causing any fitment issues. So we'll go ahead and open and close the bolt and make sure that there's nothing hanging up. We'd hate to damage the bolt. This time we can just use our torque wrench and we can tighten these down. 15 to 20 inch-pounds is sufficient. And like the wheels on your car, we don't want to just tighten these all in a line. We actually want to kind of distribute that tightening process out. And if you do happen to ding up a screw a little bit, a black permanent marker works really well for just touching up anything where you might have made a mistake. At this point in time, we can start looking at the scope and getting it prepared for mounting as well. Most scopes, when you receive them from the manufacturer, will be centered in their adjustment range, but we want to go ahead and verify that. To do so, we'll turn this dial all the way to one direction, and then we'll count our revolutions going back. Just a little over 5. So starting back at the original home position, we can come back 2.5. 1, 2.5. And we'll repeat that on the elevation dial to make sure that we're centered in the adjustment range. We'll also want to double check and make sure that everything moves freely on the optic and that there's no damage to the optic body itself. We're going to install a set of Weaver rings today. I've selected these rings. Quick detach in case the firearm needs to be shipped or the scope will need to be removed in the field. There's no right or wrong direction for the levers or retention screws to sit on the receiver itself. It's a matter of personal preference. I like to always point any mounting screws on my rings to the side of the ejection port and bolt. I've already got a lot of stuff hanging off the front of the rifle. I want this back nice and smooth so when it's slinged that it can ride comfortably without anything poking me in a funny spot. At this point in time, we can just back these screws out and we're just going to loosely mount this stuff. We don't need to do anything tight at this point in time because we need to verify that the scope will fit everything properly and get it adjusted to the right location. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove the top halves of the rings here. And I do want to keep these in sets just in case one is machined odd or they've been lapped. We also may want to verify at this point in time that the rings are in good alignment with each other so that we can use a lapping system if we need to. This shouldn't be a problem on anything that's a modern firearm, but it's very common in older firearms, and especially sporterized firearms. So we're just going to snug these. We'll place the scope in the base, put the ring halves on. At this point in time, we're not actually going to really hard mount anything because we want to make sure that this scope is sitting in the right position. I'm not going to tighten anything down or use any thread locker till we get a little further along in the process. It takes more time to do it this way, but it's definitely helpful and you get a much better finished product when we're done. At this point, I just want the rings just tight enough to secure the scope so it doesn't fall out or that it's not going to slide back and forth, because we do need to verify that it's far enough forward or rearward for the eye relief of the optic itself. To do that, we can close the bolt, and we're actually going to mount the scope and rifle and adjust the scope forward or rearward as necessary to get the proper eye relief. We'll start at the lowest power setting on the optic. And I just want to verify that I have a full picture through the optic. So I've done it at low power first. Now I'm going to set her back down. I'm going to hold the scope well. I'll go to high power, and we're going to do the same thing all over again. Looks like this one needs to come a little further rearward. Now we want to maintain enough eye relief so the recoil doesn't hit us in the forehead or the face, because that can be painful, and well, nobody wants to have to be bleeding when they're going to the gun range. At this point in time, the scope eye relief seems to be set properly for me, and I'm just going to go ahead and take a marker, a permanent marker, and I'm just going to mark the edges of the ring locations so that I have those for a reference point, so I know exactly how far forward or rearward my scope is going to need to be. At this point in time, we can take a look at getting the optic itself square to the receiver. We'll use a leveling tool inside the receiver, and to do that, we're going to go ahead and remove the bolt. And what we want to do is use the adjustment slides in here to get this fitting right inside of the receiver raceways on a flat portion so we can level the receiver. Or in case of this rifle, we have a nice flat spot at the rear of the receiver, and it's a very easy place for us to go ahead and mount that level. I like to use a plumb bomb on a string hanging from across the room where I'm mounting. This will allow me to make sure that the reticle is plumb to the earth and not to my eye, which is very easy to do. So using the string level, I will just look through the optic, and I'm just going to adjust the reticle in line with that string right next to it. At that point in time, I'm confident that the scope has been mounted properly, it's in the right location. We've verified our eye relief, and we can go ahead and begin the process of actually hard securing the rings to the optic. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and just do one ring set at a time, especially with ring sets that have anywhere from 2 to 6 screws per ring. There's a lot going on. And we've made an adjustment to get the reticle leveled in this optic already. We don't want to have to go back and readjust it. So the front one's still tight, and we're good to go. I'm going to use just a little bit of thread locker. We don't need very much. People have a tendency to use too much thread locker and really cause a mess when they're putting this stuff together. So we can just put a very small dab. And if you're at all concerned that you have too much, it never hurts to come back with a Q-tip and just wipe off any excess. We'll start both the screws. And you don't want to tighten one side down all the way. We really just want to kind of go at it slowly, back and forth and alternating. And I'm just going to go ahead and snug this, and then we'll move to the front and repeat the process. And once we've got that optic all snug down, we can go ahead and use a torque screwdriver to get this to the proper torque values. For rings, 15 to 20 inch-pounds is more than sufficient. And again, we will use an alternating pattern to break that load up across the surfaces. People have a real tendency to over-tighten the rings, causing damage to the optic, and that can give you erratic groups and can give you issues with your shooting and reliability of your optic itself. So taking caution is important. Now we've mounted the optic into the rings and it is one functioning unit. We can actually go ahead and start working our way backwards and make sure that we have Loctite on all the surfaces where it's appropriate now. I'm just going to go ahead and take this optic and ring set off. And I'm just going to mark here again where my rings are located so that I use the same slot every time so I don't end up mounting the scope too far forward or too far rearward. We can go ahead and remove these screws one at a time on the receiver now and make sure that we apply the Loctite needed so that these don't shake free when firing. At this point in time, we can go ahead and put the scope back onto the rail. And again, we'll just use the marks that we put on with the marker earlier. And there, we should have a set of rings properly mounted with an optic, properly mounted to the rifle itself, which will give you the best optical performance of both scope and rifle combo.